Hi LS6 students, it's Mrs. Shomura-Takata, and today I'm going to be going over with you some of the notes that you are going to have to take and write under the Mesopotamia tabs that you've glued into your social studies composition book. So I would like you to pull up, as you can see on the screen, the Mesopotamia assignment slideshow, and then also open up your composition book to where you glued your flaps here. They look like this, okay? And you should have glued them like flaps so you could lift them up and write notes underneath. If you did not, if you somehow made a mistake and you glued it flat, well, you did, and you can just write your notes on top of it, okay? So there is a way to still do it. But maybe you should, I want to advise you to watch the video when the teachers go over how to glue things down in your composition book, because it'll make it easier to follow along on a video. Okay, so this is the cover of this assignment slideshow, and you should have already completed, oh, sorry, I don't know what that is. Oy, no, I don't want that. Okay, you should have already completed slide 2 and slide 3 and slide 4. Even though mine is not complete, mine is just a sample, and 5, and you should have done slide 6, which was the circle map about the nomads to from nomads to farmers video, and then answered your frame of reference questions. Okay, so we're going to focus today on slide 8, slide 9, slide 10, and slide 11. Okay, so as you can see, slide 8 has the heading, has that flap actually that says rivers. So you're going to find it. If you didn't glue it in this order, it's okay. Just find your rivers flap. And you are going to be writing the notes that are on this slideshow underneath this flap. So the rivers in Mesopotamia, the rivers are the Tigris and Euphrates. So Mesopotamia is between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The rivers allow for good farming conditions and allow the people to grow food so that they can feed a lot of people, allow the farmers to grow a lot of food so they could feed a lot of people. And they also use the rivers for trading products and for transporting things, moving things from here to there. Okay, so please copy those 3 bullets under your rivers flap, or if it's glued down on top. Then tonight for homework, or this weekend for homework, you're going to write the notes about Mesopotamia's weather and flooding. This for me is down here. Okay, and this one has a few more bullets. So the climate in Mesopotamia is hot and dry. There are droughts, and as you remember from the reading, droughts are long periods of time with no rainfall, little or no rainfall. The river flooded in the spring, leaving rich soil for farming. And the farmers and the people of Mesopotamia depended on silt. The yearly flooding, though, came at the wrong time. It flooded during spring, which was their harvest time, when they're gathering their crops that have already grown and that they're ready to eat. So it would flood during that time and not during the planting season, which was in fall, okay, or autumn. And the last bullet is that southern Mesopotamia, it has fertile fields. Southern Mesopotamia is more fertile than northern Mesopotamia. And this kind of connects to when we studied geography in the last portfolio. You needed to know the cardinal directions. So if this is Mesopotamia, well, it's kind of like this. This up here would be northern, and this down here is southern. And the area down here is more fertile, which means it can grow more crops. Okay, so copy these notes in. And remember, because this is a video, you could always stop it. And if you don't want to listen to me, you can just pull this up on your slideshow and you can just copy it yourself as well. Okay? All right, slide 10 is about irrigation and farming in Mesopotamia. And again, there are a little bit more bullets here. Please copy them all down. okay? Because right now you are gathering information. And from now until the end of quarter one, you are going to be gathering information about Mesopotamia and what life and agriculture was like over there. And then when we come back in quarter two, you're going to be studying ancient Egypt. And you are going to learn about agriculture and what life was like in Egypt, which is in a different part, close, but not exactly the same part, near Mesopotamia, part of the world. And so after you study Egypt, you're then going to have to decide, would you rather live in Mesopotamia or Egypt, and give your reasons why. And it is not an option to not choose. Okay, so you're going to want to get as much information as you can. So for irrigation and farming in Mesopotamia, irrigation is, by definition, a way of watering crops. And irrigation allowed farmers to grow lots of food. Okay, because I want to remind you back to when we first started talking about Mesopotamia. Remember that thousands and thousands of years ago, people didn't just live in one place. They moved around. They were nomads, remember? And they moved around because they were looking for food. They'd live in a place and they'd run out of food, so they'd have to move somewhere else to find more food. So when the Mesopotamians figured out irrigation and farming, it allowed the farmers to grow a lot of food so they didn't have to keep moving around. The irrigation and farming also helped control floods, and they did that by building dams and channels to hold back the water and then to direct the water. They also used irrigation to bring water to the fields because they built walls and waterways and ditches. The two leading crops in ancient Mesopotamia were wheat and barley. But they also grew beans, onions, lettuce, cucumbers, spices, apples, etc. There were other things they grew. They didn't just only have wheat and barley. The farming in Mesopotamia included having sheep and cattle, and the sheep were used to drink milk. The people drank the sheep milk, and they used their wool, which is like their fur, I guess. It's not fur, but it's their covering to create fabrics and things like that. Okay, material. And they used cattle for their meat, to drink their milk. The skin of the cattle, they used it as leather, and they used the cattle as workhorses, work animals in the field, okay? Because they could move like the plows and the things. All right, so we're on to the last flap, and it is natural defenses. And again, let me kind of show you. So you did irrigation. You should have done irrigation and farming. And then now you will type these or write these notes under natural defenses. Mesopotamia's natural defenses, they didn't have very much, as you can see. There's only two things there. And when you read the bullets, flat mud plains helped keep enemies away. So it's like large areas of flat mud land. So, it's kind of inconvenient and get dirty. But there were few other natural defenses. So if you can't defend yourself from invaders, it's probably not as safe as a place that you could defend yourself from invaders. So just keep that in mind. Mesopotamia didn't have a lot. I mean, there were some, the mud plains, but they didn't have a lot of defenses. Okay, so your homework tonight or this weekend is to write those notes under these or on top of the flaps, okay? Because again, you're gathering information about Mesopotamia. And when we study Egypt, you are going to learn about these 4 things for Egypt, okay? All right, so the second part of this is I want to go over this slideshow that you are going to have access to. And I'm going to go over it. There isn't really anything that there's no worksheet or a slide that you have to answer about the slideshow, but I want to just kind of go over it with you. So it is called the First River Valley Civilizations, and it's focused on Mesopotamia, okay? And so this is kind of a long slideshow, so I'm going to go over it, and it's going to be talking a lot about Mesopotamia and kind of giving you a bigger picture of what we're trying to get you to learn. So again, this slideshow has a lot of information. So I'm going to present it to you and I'm going to just kind of read it to you, okay? Because there might be some words that you're not familiar with. So I'm going to present this right now. All right, the first river valley civilizations. A social studies big question for this unit of study is, how did the development of agriculture in river valleys lead to the first civilizations? And then as a writing piece, which civilization would you have chosen to live in? Mesopotamia or ancient Egypt? And explain your reasons. This first slideshow is all about Mesopotamia. That's why in the title it says Mesopotamia. Next quarter, you will get another slideshow that looks similar to this, but that slideshow is all about Egypt. Okay? So I just wanted to make that clear from the beginning. All right. So who were the earliest humans? The earliest humans were hunters and gatherers, meaning they hunted for their food and or gathered it. They did not grow their own food. They ate animals, insects, nuts, berries, fruits. But since they didn't grow their own food, they had to move from place to place. If they stayed in one place, they would have starved because it would not take long before they ate everything up. The people who move around from place to place are called nomads. So again, you're hearing that term again. So this illustration is, being a nomad is rough. I'm always traveling around hunting and gathering my food. And he has a rock and he's going to pound that insect, eat it, I guess. Okay. Farming begins and nomads settle. After the last ice age ended, nomads began to domesticate or tame. So domesticate is a fancy word for the phrase tame, to tame animals and plants for human use. They were able to get milk, wool, and meat from the animals. The process of growing crops and domesticating animals for food is called agriculture. Let me repeat that. The process of growing crops and domesticating animals for food is called agriculture. People learned how to grow food in different parts of the world at about the same time. The idea of farming did not start in one area and spread. So people who lived in different parts of the world, it kind of just started happening at the same time. It's not like farming started in one place and then people moved and then they learned how to farm and they spread that idea of farming. It just kind of popped up in different parts of the world. Agriculture caused many nomads, remember the people who wander around, to settle in one place. These new farmers had to stay close to their fields and live in areas with a water source. Early farmers chose to live in river valleys. Now remember, if you want to grow plants, you need a source of fresh water, not just ocean water. You can't, well, a lot of plants that we eat need fresh water, not salt water. Okay? River valleys. So here's the definition. A river is a large natural stream of water that runs through the land. So as you can see in that picture right here, this is an example of it's an illustration or a picture of a river. A valley, though, is an area of low land between hills or mountains. I wouldn't say this is the best picture of a river valley. What you'd probably see more of is like there's like mountains and then the river kind of is going through. So a river valley is, there's a valley, it's kind of like this shape, and then there's a river that goes through. So a question you might want to think about is, based on the definitions above, why do you think that early farmers chose to plant crops in river valleys? Well, the answer is because river water runs through the land and valleys were low areas. River valleys were the perfect flat place to grow and water crops. Okay? So when it's a valley, it's not like this. It's typically like rounded, I guess. Okay? All right, let's go on. 2 more reasons river valleys were a great place to settle down. Well, the river water could be used for drinking. Now you know that we cannot drink salt water. We need fresh water in order to survive. So farmers and their families and their domesticated animals needed to have plenty of water to drink. So that river could be used for people and animals to drink. And the rivers made transportation easier. So imagine trying to transport your crops or the food and the things that you grew from place to place by just walking. The earliest farmers did not even have wheels back way, way, way back because a wheel was not yet invented. It was just easier to float down the river in a small boat or a raft. Okay, so you can kind of see how you could kind of look in that picture and kind of see like, oh yeah, I could see how it'd be easy for a little raft to just kind of move some of the crops. All right, so where were the first river valley civilizations? So if you look in this gigantic arrow, we will concentrate on just two of the river valley civilizations, Mesopotamia and Egypt. And so in this red circle are the areas. Now here's the Indian Ocean. That should sound familiar. We studied the oceans. And here's India. And so the Indian Ocean is between like Asia and Africa. And so here, the orange part is Mesopotamia. This orange shaded area is Mesopotamia, and that is what we are studying now. However, next quarter, you're going to be studying this purple area, which is Egypt. Okay? So, but we are going to be concentrating. They're not super far away. It's not like here and all the way over here, but they're pretty different. There's a lot of differences. Okay? So Mesopotamia is also known as the Fertile Crescent, and this was established around 2500 BC. So if you look at this map key here, you will see that the green represents the Fertile Crescent. Okay, so all this green part is the Fertile Crescent. And you see Mesopotamia is right here in the Fertile Crescent. And if you see the arrows, the orange arrows, it says the direction of flow of the Tigris and Euphrates. So remember, in the reading, said that the Tigris and Euphrates kind of start in this Taurus Mountains up here. So I think the Taurus Mountains probably extend this way. So, and they start up here and then they flow this way. They flow south. So these are mountains that are high, and the river flows lower south into the Persian Gulf. And we got that in the reading as well. Now, if you look at this purple color on this map key, it says Sumer. And that is a part of Mesopotamia that was kind of, I guess, more well known. Okay? But when we are talking about Mesopotamia, we're kind of just talking about this whole general Fertile Crescent area. Okay. So, here's some recapping. Let me move myself here. There we go. What type of civilization was Mesopotamia? Well, it was a river valley civilization. Number two, who first chose to settle near river valleys, and what were 3 reasons they chose to settle there? Well, the nomadic people. Remember the guys who were moving around, families that were moving around, groups of people? They settled near river valleys because there was drinking water for people and domesticated animals. There were water for crops, and then there was transportation. Okay. So number 3, Mesopotamia was located between what 2 rivers? Mesopotamia was located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. And what does Mesopotamia mean? Mesopotamia means the land between 2 rivers. So it means basically its literal location, land between 2 rivers. Mesopotamia was a part of a fertile strip of land called the Fertile Crescent. Okay? Oh, okay. What's happening? Alrighty. Okay. Now I'm going to move myself back over here. Okay, so some Mesopotamia notes. A geography of Mesopotamia. It was an ancient river valley civilization. Ancient nomads settled there for 3 main reasons, and we just went over that in the last slide. Drinking water for people and animals, domesticated animals, water for the crops, and better transportation. Again, it was located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and it was in the area called the Fertile Crescent. And Mesopotamia was known as the land between two rivers. And again, both rivers start in the Taurus Mountains, the northern part of the area, in the country of Turkey, and then it flowed south into the Persian Gulf. Okay, I can't do it that way. This is interesting. Alrighty here. All right. So, natural defenses. Bringing that up again. Natural defenses, what the definition is, are landforms or things not made or caused by people that provide protection from outside invaders. So, natural defenses are landforms. So, it's things that naturally occur in nature. It is not things made by people that can protect people. So, it's not like it's a wall. A natural defense might be a mountain, or it might be a gigantic ocean. These could be large deserts, cliffs, high mountains, rough waterways, or any land or water form that would make an invasion by an army difficult. Okay? So you see this soldier here. Natural defenses would sure make my job easier. Does Mesopotamia have any? Let's see. Mesopotamia. So here we have another map of the Fertile Crescent at Mesopotamia. And if you look at this, unfortunately, if you look at the area between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers on a map, which is right here, Mesopotamia was just a flat mud plain. Other civilizations just outside of the rivers often invaded Mesopotamia. So people who lived out here would attack and invade Mesopotamia. So, for the most part, yes, they did have mud flats, but it's pretty safe to say that Mesopotamia doesn't have very many natural defenses. So this soldier is saying, I'm doomed. Okay. All right. So natural defenses, we had this in the notes you took. There are the flat mud plains, but for the most part, Mesopotamia did not have much defenses from outside invaders. Like no landforms or cliffs or mountains or deserts. Okay. Now, the rivers. The Mesopotamians depended on the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. However, the effects of their floods brought both positive and negative consequences. So if you look here on this slide, we have a list of positives and we also have a list of negatives. So let's go over some of the positives. I'm going to move myself up. So one of the positives is that the rivers would flood and leave a layer of silt over the land. Okay? And the silt created rich soil that was good for farming. So it was this layer of nutrient-rich soil so that when you planted seeds or planted plants in it, they would grow. And then the rivers also allowed them to get from place to place to trade. So those were some of the positives. However, in Mesopotamia, the negatives of the rivers were that the floods of the Tigris and Euphrates were unpredictable. That means nobody knew when they were going to come. It would just hit and they would be like, they weren't ready for it. So because they were unpredictable, crops were lost and homes where people lived, shelters were destroyed, and people died. Okay, so these were some of the negatives of living in Mesopotamia near the river, and these were some of the positives. Okay, so here's a definition of silt, because you've heard this term a lot, and now you're probably wondering, what the heck is silt? Silt is sediment made up of clay and bits of black soil and rock. It has minerals that make soil rich and good for farming. Silt is carried by rivers, but during floods, it spreads out over the land. So when a river floods, it moves big and across this way, right? And then the silt gets put on the land. So silt is left behind on the land when the flood water dries up. Okay, so if a river is like this, normally it's like this narrow, and then it overflows and takes over all of this other land. I know it's hard to see me. It takes over all this other land. The silt gets put on this part of the land. And then when the water dries up and the river goes back to being like this, all this area here has that nice silt so that they can grow their crops. Okay? Alrighty. And so again, I know we're seeing some repetitive stuff, but I think, it's good to hear the information over and over so it kind of sticks in your brain. So the rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers started in the Taurus Mountains in the country of Turkey and emptied into the Persian Gulf. And again, we're kind of recapping some positives and negatives. So positives were that the flooding brought silt or rich soil for farming, and the rivers were used as transportation to trade. Also, we can say that they used it for drinking water, right? Some of the negatives, though, were the unpredictable flooding that often ruined crops, destroyed homes, and took lives. Oh, I moved myself again. Okay, maybe I'm going to move myself up now. Sorry, I have to keep moving myself so you can see the screen. So irrigation developments. Irrigation and water control systems. Irrigation, the definition is a method of bringing water to a field from one place to water crops. So you're moving water to water plants, okay? So water control systems are methods or devices used to control the flow of water for irrigation or to prevent flood damage. So water control systems are kind of twofold. So you can use the water control to help you do irrigation, but it's also to prevent damage from floods. So that would be like the building of the walls and things like that. Okay. All right. Question. Why did ancient Mesopotamians need both irrigation and water control systems? Well, the answer is that Mesopotamians wanted a way to control the unpredictable flooding of the Tigris and Euphrates and store water during droughts. So what they did was they learned how to, when it flooded, to get that flood water and hold on to it, put it into like ditches and canals. And when they needed the water, when they were, when it was time to water when they're planting things, they could use that flood water because there was a lot of it. It flooded, and they just saved it and they used it to help them water their crops. So they had it for two reasons: to control the flooding, and then they used that stored water during their droughts, which again is long periods of time without water, without rain. All right, so here are some pictures or images of some of these irrigation and water control systems. So farmers eventually developed irrigation and water control systems to water crops and help floods. Here are 4 that they developed. So these are canals. So you see how it's kind of like dug out? The water would run through that. Okay. And then artificial lakes. So I think it's kind of hard to see. I believe perhaps that this might be a river, and then they created this, and then they probably had a big lake that it attached to. Or maybe this picture is showing that that is the artificial lake that they've created. They've dug this channel out, and then the water, the flood water would go in there, and then it would fill this gigantic lake up. Maybe that's what that's a picture of. Okay? So artificial lakes. Artificial means it wasn't formed naturally. People made it because they dug and they prepared a waterway to go feed into that lake. Okay, so this next picture are pictures of gates. So you can see how the water here is coming, and they stop it with the gates. They just drop the gate and then the water stops. Okay, so it's pointing to this gate here, and there's another gate here. And then here's a levee, and I know this was in the video that you guys watched. So a levee is a type of wall between the river and the land that controlled the flooding. So here is land. You see how the land is low here? And here's the river, the water side. And they built this levee, and it's flat up here. And so it protects the land from the water. Because if this levee was not here, all of this would be like filled with water or water damaged. Okay? And you say this word levee. All right. So how did the agricultural development of irrigation eventually lead to the river valley civilization of Mesopotamia? So this is kind of a rendition of Mesopotamia. Let me move myself here. So this is kind of, I guess, like a timeline or some kind of maybe like a flow map, we could say. Agricultural developments led to the growth of Mesopotamian civilization. So, 1, irrigation systems helped Mesopotamians grow a surplus, which means a lot, of food. So number 2, because there was a surplus of crops, there was enough food to feed large numbers of people. So the population of people increased. And then 3, this led to the formation of Mesopotamian cities, where people now had time to do things besides farming. And they developed new agricultural inventions, like the wagon wheel. Okay, so remember how before they were saying that they used the river because there was no wheel, but still in Mesopotamia, they ended up inventing a wheel and a plow that made farming even easier. Okay, so again, here's the definition of surplus. Surplus means more than what is needed or can be used. So extra, a lot. Okay. And so here it is again. It's basically the same thing like that other, the previous screen. So they developed irrigation systems, canals, gates, levees, artificial lakes to water crops and help control the floods. And then those irrigation systems helped the farmers grow a lot of food, a surplus of food. And because there was a surplus of crops and food, more people were able to move there and live there. And, families got bigger. People had kids and they didn't have to keep moving around. And so the population increased. And then that led to the Mesopotamian cities. And now people who lived there had more time to do things other than farming. And so then they started to develop inventions. They invented things such as the wagon wheel and a plow. Okay? And that is it for this. Okay? So I know I went over it. If you wanted to read this by yourself, you're more than welcome to. So I just wanted to go over this so that you had access to these notes and maybe some explanation. All right, so I'm going to exit this now. If you have questions, and again, this you don't have an assignment for this slideshow. This is just basically information that you should have and you should store in here, because next quarter you're going to be getting information about Egypt, and you're going to have to store in another part, and then you're going to decide, which civilization would I have wanted to live in? And you have to be able to give reasons from what you've learned in our classes, okay, as to why you would want to live in one over the other. You cannot live in both. You have to choose one. You got to pick a side, okay? If you have any questions, you can email your teachers, you can Google Voice or call them, you can remind them, you can show up to their office hours. We have office hours every afternoon, the last period of the day. Okay, so this weekend though, make sure you do your notes in your social studies composition book for the 4 flaps. Okay, and if you need to pause this video or rewind it, feel free to do that. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Bye.